The power and impact of professional certifications have been a topic of much debate. Do these certifications genuinely add value? Do they matter? Are they important for one's professional journey? From aspiring software engineers to established neurosurgeons, every advanced professional today kind of grapples with these benefits versus costs of having these advanced certifications. How does digital transformation play a role in impacting the associations themselves and their certification programs for their members, for their staff? And can they use this to really change their industry? I'm Kahveci, and I got a chance to sit down with Scott Whitmire. He has a super interesting background in board positions, leadership level at multiple associations with certification programs. He's a chairman at ACEA and VP of Education Services for ABPMP. He himself holds certifications, so he's been on both sides of the table and is an expert in enterprise systems architecture. So that sort of systems thinking applies in the way that he approaches these certification programs in a very systematic way. Came away with some really interesting insights and systems to apply to other associations, which I'm excited to share from his 30 plus years experience in the field here. People think of the certification as, do I really need it? Basically, is it going to help me get more of a paycheck? Is it going to help me get a job? That kind of thing. Or is it required to get me access to something else, like the common body of knowledge, or in real estate, they get advanced kind of MLS access, for example, if they're members of certain associations and such.
The only thing wanted to mention is the challenges that organizations are having. One of the things we find is that people who get certified in a profession expect to get a pay differential reasonably because they put in a lot of work, and everything. Employers are going, well, I don't want certification because I have to pay more. And so there's the other side of that coin. And of course, cost is always going to win out over quality in that area. So I can hire two non-certified people who think they are software engineers or architects to write code. The code's going to be crap, but we'll test it into oblivion and see what happens. And maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And that's the way management's been working. I mean, even people who wrote code for a living before I became a manager. And I'm not sure we have a way to fight that in the software engineering field or the technology field. In medicine, it's a lot easier because while your medical license isn't at risk necessarily, if you're, for example, if you're a neurosurgeon, being board certified by the ABNS doesn't necessarily affect your license, but hospitals look at that as a way to differentiate. It's sort of like tenure. If you don't have it, you should be on the track to get it. And that's something that the medical professions and the specialties especially have ingrained in their system over 100 years or more. Building architects require certification to maintain their licensure. Accountants and lawyers, same thing. So you have to have a certain amount of CE credits in order to maintain your status at the bar. The AICPA, I guess is what it is. So they have the advantage of legal and professional engineers as well. There's most professional engineering degree certifications, which are legislated, have embedded in them certification requirements. And so civil engineering, the various societies within civil engineering have, and electrical engineering have courses and continuing education they offer. They don't manage the continuing education. The continuing education is managed by the engineer every time they renew their license, which is, I think, a 4-year thing. So various professions handle it differently. The kind of looking at what you guys offer, having an organization do that in a uniform way across various professions might actually be a benefit to people, because every association looks at that and go, huh, how are we going to do that? Because it's a challenge. It's a systemic and process challenge for largely volunteer-run organizations in many cases. And so even and professional associations are losing members. I mean, IEEE has been having this problem for 15 years now. The problem is employers just don't care, and that's the real issue. And until the public does, employers won't. And so that's a problem we've got to deal with as a set of professions.
Have you seen any ways to somewhat formalize those value adds and really differentiate it and say, hey, this program is really worth it? One thing you mentioned about medicine is there's this very formalized system already nationwide around the states, licensure connecting with the certifications. Hospitals look for the certifications as a way for differentiating specialties, that sort of thing. It's tough in other fields where it's not nearly as formalized, and the employers are not necessarily looking for every software architect role to ensure, hey, they have to be certified, right? Is it down to kind of the sound bites that people can include in their resumes? What actually ends up kind of working to pull people and keep people for the long term?
And I'll use ICE as an example because I've had longer experience with them. Certified architects just work differently, and the results bear out the improvement in that you get more done. Not just that they're necessarily more productive, although they end up more productive. It's just it's more streamlined, and they hit the target the first time more often. Well, I need a certification management system. Okay, once I figure out what they mean by that, now I can go through and say, well, do you want it on the web or do you want it on a computer? What kind of system is it? How many users are there, and whether they're globally distributed or not? How many hours of the day are first shift? How many users were there? Is data used generated locally? All data is generated locally, but is it used locally or is it used globally? So is data shared across location? Particularly things like inventory data. How often is the inventory of a warehouse shared with other warehouses? And then how reliable does it have to be? How costly is not having the system available when you need it? And it's just largely a function of matching problem patterns to solution pattern and recognizing what those are in an apprenticeship type organization. Other organizations, the business process management folks, their test is more about what you know and their body of knowledge, and they test on the contents of their book. Engineering is one of those things like medicine where practice matters. So experience matters because you learn stuff on the job that you don't learn in school or even in continuing education courses. The measures, capacity, the process measures, capacity, how high volume can I handle in my current configuration? And the activity cost, how long in minutes does it take to execute the process one time through? You can't just change a number and make them change. You have to actually invest in the process to change it. So there's capacity, activity cost in minutes, the defect rate, how many defects per level of activity or unit of activity or output or whatever opportunity do you get? It's usually defects per opportunity. So capacity, activity cost, defect rate, cost structure, the mix of fixed costs versus variable costs. You're building a widget that requires machinery. The first widget requires purchasing all the machinery. So that's fixed cost. Cycle time. And cycle time is how long does it take to complete one execution, giving all the other things that happen inside. A building might be able to go up in 7 days, but it might take 30 days to get the permit. Everything is digital, from product definitions to product development to how customers interact with the company. The problem is that in most companies, there are 3 separate flows of things. There's a flow of information, which is the digital part of it. There's the flow of funds, which is how money flows through the system. And then there are the flow of goods, both raw goods and manufactured goods. How does a retailer who has brick and mortar stores transform digitally? Even if you ship online, you still have the flow of goods through the warehouse and into the system. So you still have that physical flow of logistics that you have to deal with that's not going to be a complete digital transformation. So you can't go full digital unless even if you deliver services, you can't go full digital because there's got to be a delivery point at some point for your systems and continuing education requirements. What do you financial the perspectives of the balanced scorecard and the strategy map put out by Norton and Kaplan in the 90s. The balanced scorecard is a set of measures, but the perspectives are what matter. What are my financial goals? What happens in the business realm, which is always a lagging indicator of what's going on internally. Below that are the activities and behaviors of customers and probably competitors. So those are the internal process. Below that are the things that I need to know, the skills I need to have on board, and the tools I need to have in order to pull it off. And that's where you get into these process management issues and business capabilities of capacity and activity cost and cost structure and things like that is jiggering those bottom 2 layers.
A lot of our folks who will see this will be some sort of association leader, right? Maybe also running education, CEO, executive director of associations. There's definitely a whole lot of challenges. Many of them they don't have the sort of funds that they wish they had to be able to do more for their members, maybe dealing with decreasing membership, trying to keep people on board as well as grow interest within their field. And exactly like you said, those are all sort of lagging indicators. If you look at member churn, for example, that's a lagging indicator of something else that's been going on internally that needs to change. Do you know of, or have you sort of thought through any of the more leading indicators, things that should be tracked ahead of time, and the kind of metrics that can be high leverage to impact to get the sort of goals that you set as?
It's largely a matter of focus. As an association, your members are practicing some profession or set of skills. Let's talk business process management, for example. As you look at what your members do in their jobs and understand the four perspectives, you're really equipping your members to improve the bottom perspective, the learning and the business capability. Goldrat and the goal talked about 3 questions: what to change it to, and how to change it. Well, equip your members, if you're process management folks, answer those 3 questions quickly and understand that will be valuable because they don't have to be trained. So equip your members to execute their profession, understanding that that's only going to appear in the bottom layer, bottom perspective. So it's a matter of focus. Professional association where you're dealing with members and volunteers, because members are only going to pay you. They're like customers. They're only going to pay you for things they get benefit from. So what benefit, what value add can you provide that makes them more valuable on their marketplace? Because that's really what they're all about. Is they're a business buying skills and knowledge that makes them more capable in competing with other professionals in their market. How can you help that? And is it worth the cost of membership and certification and continuing that? So unless it's worth it, then it's not going to happen. Legislative, you can't be in the business without the license, and you can't get the license without the education, and you can't get the education without being a member of the association. So that's sort of a lock. It's an anti-competitive lock in some people's view, and it holds prices artificially high from a supply standpoint.
What do you think is the biggest sort of concern or challenge that those types of the boards and staff are working on in terms of education right now that you see across?
I think everybody works on the assumption that the same model works everywhere. We have a certification. We're going to require so many credits of recertification every year, and so we need a continuing education program. Well, maybe not, and maybe it needs to be different. One of the things you can do if you come to the conclusion that you really do need continuing education is make sure that your content is top-notch and refreshed. Does it contribute to your members being able to look at the body of knowledge and go, experience doesn't really bear that out. We need to tweak it. And at that point, you can say that your continuing education program is successful. If people are just racking up credits to recertify and they're not getting any value out of it, that's not going to last very long because they're just spending money for no reason. And so you need to really look at what you deliver, not how you deliver it. How you deliver it's not that big a deal. You can do in-person courses. People will pay to travel to take a decent course. They'll go to a seminar. You can do workshops at conferences that people are attending anyway. Good content will drive its own audience. And then do you make it publicly available? Do you make it available to non-members, maybe for an additional fee, so you can generate some revenue from that? Once you decided the certification is an issue, that you've proven that certified members are better than non-certified practitioners, and you've decided you need to deliver continuing education on a regular basis to maintain certification, now you need to figure out what the content is, and they need to price in such a way that entices them to become a member to take advantage of that. Because that's going to drive membership, because that's one of the huge value adds that associations can provide is access to knowledge that you can't get anywhere else. And that's really what it amounts to. But nobody does that.
When it comes to associations being able to save time and money on their own sort of software systems and internal system design of how they operate, how would you suggest sort of thinking about that while balancing a design and implementation that really kind of meets their unique needs?
I would give the same advice I would give any company. Start with your customer touch points. Well, how do you go about creating an experience that drives that or encourages that? And start there, and then just build what you need. I mean, your back end accounting could be on spreadsheets in Excel if that's sufficient, because your membership is small enough. You don't need accounting software. What you really need is, a decent website experience, because if that involves continuing education, that requires the delivery experience.
Think about the member experience. How do you actually deliver value? What's your real purpose?
Your member experience to be, as a member, what do I want to be able to do? What do I need to be able to do? And just limit it to that, and then make those as smooth and painless as possible, and the rest won't matter. You'll start exceeding capacity of your internal processing to start making investments internally, but that doesn't come for a while. The first question I would ask is, why does education matter? Architecture, business process management, there are technical skills. So, okay, but what else? And if they can't answer that, then maybe continuing education isn't a requirement, or shouldn't be. But if they're clear on that, then they can go from there. Most of the medical specialties at the Mayo Clinic, for example, have annual retreats, and they do most of the continuing education there. The Society for Neurological Oncology, SNO, has an annual conference that's huge, and it's mostly continuing education. So it's all delivered at that point. So very little of it is online. So given your profession and the nature of your membership, what is the best way to deliver that knowledge? It's not a revenue driver. You don't want to use it. You don't want to, you don't want to think of it in terms of driving revenue. The revenue is a side product, because you're a nonprofit. Your goal isn't to make money. So it depends on what your goals are and how you want to do it. What I would say to somebody like you in your position is to learn process management, business architecture, because those are the two skills that every professional needs to manage any kind of organization. And you would probably drop most of your associations if you just had skills in those areas. How do skills and knowledge and tools affect processes that I can deliver versus how does that affect my customers? And that's business architecture, particularly in associations. Our job is to make our professions better at what they do, not grow members.
Hey, thank you for joining and watching so far. I'd love to hear from you. Quick question. What do you think sets the best association leaders apart? That's what we'd like to learn. We're all about shared knowledge, so come join us, subscribe to the Continuing Education Journal, and we'd love to learn together.